read each sentence and we'll see whether it is clear. It is not actually known that in any primitive times man lived to himself or with only his mate, as do some of the animals. All record of him shows him to us as a social animal, not an isolated body and spirit. The law of the pack has always overridden his individual law of self-development. He seems always to have been born, to have lived, to have been formed as a unit in a mass. Okay, I started reading. We'll see. I think it's very simple what he's saying. He is discussing this, because he has come to the second level of social conduct. Okay. Standards of conduct, social. Second one is a social law. The society lays down certain rules which everybody has to follow. So he is asking now, it is not actually known that in any primitive times man lived to himself or with only his mate, as do some of the animals. Okay? The animals also mostly, they live in herds or groups or swarms. Okay? But there are certain animals who are loners. For instance, tigers, but they don't live with their mate. Okay? They just roam about wild. Particularly tigers are well known for that. But most of the other animals, they live in a group with their mate. Okay? So, this is what we are going into sociology. And sociology is a very interesting subject. Sometimes, among birds, for instance, they mate for life. Okay? It's very interesting. And in some other communities, there is a sort of a not so strict observance of social law. So all that is sociology, so we will not discuss all that. But here Srimati is only saying that most probably man lived in a society, not alone by himself, in a cave or a forest or anything. Okay. All record of him shows him to us as a social animal, not an isolated body and spirit. The law of the pack has always overridden his individual law of self-development. He seems always to have been born, to have lived, to have been formed as a unit in a mass. But logically and naturally, from the psychological viewpoint, the law of personal need and desire is primary. The social law comes in as a secondary and usurping power. Usurp means to usurp his freedom. Okay? Tells him that you can't do whatever you want. There are limits to that. Okay? Even today in the world, freedom of speech is there. But freedom of speech also is, there are limits to that. You can't commit slander. You can't, you'll be open to defamation case. So there are limits to freedom. Freedom is fine. But when you live in a society, you have to lay down certain laws. Okay. But logically and naturally from the psychological viewpoint, the law of personal need and desire is primary. Naturally, everybody wants to satisfy their own needs. The social law comes in as a secondary and usurping power. Man has in him two distinct master impulses, the individualistic and the communal. The individualistic and the communal. Now, 1 second. I lost the page. What is the page? 194. Yeah, I got it. So, man has in him two distinct master impulses, the individualistic and the communal. He is always, because he has an ego, it has to be, he has to satisfy his own needs and desires. And the communal, he depends on society. He can't do without society. A personal life he has and a social life. A personal motive of conduct and a social motive of conduct. They are two different things. The possibility of their opposition and the attempt to find their equation lie at the very roots of human civilization and persist in other figures when he has passed beyond the vital animal into a highly individualized mental and spiritual progress. Okay, so that is why all communities are divided into two groups, the social groups and the individual groups. When the Industrial Revolution started, the industrialists were allowed to completely exploit society. All small children were being put to work 12 hours, 13 hours a day, and there was no limit to their greed of making money. Then, because of this social evil, the society came in and laid down certain laws. Okay, you can't employ a person more than 8 hours. You have to give him minimum wages. So these are all the social laws that come in. And the egoistic desires of individuals is restrained. It is controlled. So even today, even free speech also is controlled. So humanity is divided into two camps. One laying stress on the society, and one laying laying emphasis on the individual freedom. All the Western nations, they have the individual freedom is the most important. Okay? Therefore, capitalism becomes prominent and rampant in the West. Take example of America. Okay? Individual freedom is given a lot of importance. But there are other countries like Russia was, not now, and certain dictatorships, and China, for instance, where this society is more important than the individual. Individual is no importance at all. He is only serve the society. That's what I've been saying. But when it comes to spiritual progress, the importance of the individual becomes very, very important. Okay? So this is what he's saying in the back. Now we can go on to the next one. The existence of a social law external to the individual. So somebody has to read. Who will read today? A volunteer required.
I can read if you wish.
Okay. I don't wish, I permit. Okay, go ahead. I agree, not permit, agree. Go ahead.
The existence of a social law external to the individual is at different times a considerable advantage and a heavy disadvantage to the development of the divine in man. It is an advantage at first when man is crude and incapable of self-control and self-finding, because it erects a power other than that of his personal egoism, through which that egoism may be induced or compelled to moderate its savage demands, to discipline its irrational and often violent movements, and even to lose itself sometimes in a larger and less personal egoism. It is a disadvantage to the adult spirit ready to transcend the human formula, because it is an external standard which seeks to impose itself on him from outside. And the condition of his perfection is that he shall grow from within and in an increasing freedom, not by the suppression but by the transcendence of his perfected individuality, not any longer by a law imposed on him that trains and disciplines his members, but by the soul from within, breaking through all previous forms to possess with its light and transmute his members.
So this is the social law that he's talking about. The existence of a social law external to the individual. The individual is not given any importance, and it is external to him. Okay, there are all sorts of laws. There are As I said just now, you industrially there are laws, even in traffic there are laws. Okay, you can't do this, you can't do that. There are the red light cannot be crossed. You will be immediately pulled up. Okay, and you will have to pay a fine. All sorts of things. You can't. In a factory there are certain laws. There are labor laws. Everywhere there are laws that restrict the unhindered and totally unlimited desires of egoism. All those things are controlled to a large extent. So it's a very useful thing for when man is crude and undeveloped. But it becomes a huge problem when you want to develop in freedom. And Sri Aurobindo is very clear about it. Freedom is very, very important. Now, this freedom and also social laws, there are grades and grades. For instance, in the Western countries, certainly there are social laws, but there is a lot of laxity and a lot of give. Okay, there is a lot of play allowed. But in a country like China, where there is no, you are not even allowed to practice your own religion. Okay, they are being completely, the Uyghurs, for instance, are being they are being harassed like anything. They are being told to even forget their language. The mosques are being removed. So all this sort of thing is going on in China. Freedom is very important. So important that in our society, in the ashram, so much importance is given to freedom. Sri Aurobindo was always a votary of freedom. Even in economics, by the way, when India became free, they were Nehru had the idea of a mixed economy. Some sort of social, most of the key industries were in the government hands, not individual. But it didn't work out because inefficiency, greed, corruption, all these things come in when the government controls them. So now the whole movement is being changed. All those countries which had individual freedom, okay, they became rich very, very quickly. Okay. You allow the individual to do whatever he wants. You have to unleash the potential of the individual, and that will also help society to a large extent. In fact, let me mention to you, when Nehru had this policy of, I'm going a little out of the way only because of the freedom element. Okay? When Nehru wanted to have a mixed economy, he wanted mainly steel, okay, construction of dams, big projects, all in government hands. Telephone industries, okay, steel industries, all in government hands. And small businesses are allowed. So freedom for small businesses. But Rajagopalachari did not agree at all with this policy. So he withdrew from the Congress government, he withdrew. And he and a Parsi, Masani, okay, they made the Swarajya Party. And they wanted the freedom of the individual. The nation will develop when the individual is given right to develop and use his potential. And Sri Aurobindo would have supported them. Okay? He was very much for free enterprise, not for government control. And now after 70 years, we have discovered that government control is a total failure. Okay? So that's why they used to call in India, they used to pay Hindu rate of development. GDP used to be 1.5%, 2%. Now, after it was opened up, during the earlier days in 1994, I think, when we opened up, it was going to 8, 9%. Now it is 6%. Far superior. Okay. So anyway, so that's the freedom element is very important for, and that's the reason why even in the ashram, there's so much of freedom. Okay. And the problem with the freedom is that it can be misused. So for those who are very developed, freedom is absolutely essential. They can guide themselves. But those who are not developed enough, they don't understand the need of freedom. They will misuse the freedom. They don't do what is required. So this is what Sri Aurobindo discussed here. It is imposed on others from outside. Quickly, I'll go through each sentence. The existence of a social law external to the individual is at different times a considerable advantage and a heavy disadvantage to the development of the divine in man. It's an advantage at first when man is cruel and incapable of self-control and self-minded, the undeveloped man, because it erects a power other than that of his personal egoism, through which that egoism may be induced or compelled to moderate its savage demands too much, so that he has to be controlled, to discipline its irrational and often violent movements, and even to lose itself sometimes in a larger and less personal egoism. Note the word less personal egoism. When you have a social structure, it is not that egoism is not there. Egoism, it becomes a nationalistic collective ego. So let me be very clear on that. So that's why he's saying a less personal egoism, but it is social egoism. Everybody thinks, yes, my country must be the first in everything. It's a disadvantage to the adult spirit. Adult spirit, developed spirit. Shakespeare uses this, he says the child spirit, the child soul, the adolescent soul, and the adult soul. Those who are developed spiritually. Okay? So this is the adult soul, one who is mature. He doesn't want to be restricted to laws. Okay? Ready to transcend the human formula because it's an external standard which seeks to impose itself on him from outside. Now, if he imposes things on himself from inside, he is controlling himself. That is fine. But when somebody else tells you to control yourself from ways which you maybe do not need to control yourself from that aspect, it becomes a huge disadvantage. And the condition of his perfection is that he shall grow from within and in an increasing freedom, not by the suppression, but by the transcendence of his perfected individuality. Okay? Not by suppression, but the transcendence of his perfected individuality. A perfected individuality doesn't have any ego, but still the individual is there. There is the thing. Ego and individuality are quite different things. You must not get confused between them. Not any longer by law imposed on him that trains and disciplines his members, but by the soul from within, breaking through all previous forms to possess with its light and transmit its members. This was a problem with Sri Aurobindo also, when Sri Aurobindo is saying that the Gita has got its limits. Okay, someone challenged him. I think it was Dilip Kumar Roy who said, "God, you want to go even beyond what Sri Krishna has done?" So Sri Aurobindo had to reply to him that if what you say is true, that the past is the static and the best, then there's a question of evolution. They have to, everything, society, that's the reason why in India we have all these social laws that bind you down. Now, if you want to break those social laws, society will rebel and expose you. Okay, they will say you are not doing the right thing. But therefore, it has to be absolutely freedom is very essential for the spiritual man. Okay. He goes far beyond the Hindu laws. So Hindu says that I am not bound by any Hindu laws. He says that in many articles. Okay, so this is what says the freedom is very important. Okay, so now we can go to the next para. He discusses more about the claims of society and the claims of the individual. So, in the conflict of the Pallavi is there, and today is Tuesday. Pallavi, if you are still there, would you read? Yeah, go ahead. Read the next one. In the conflict.
In the conflict of the claims of society with the claims of the individual, two ideal and absolute solutions confront one another. There is the demand of the group that the individual should subordinate himself more or less completely or even lose his independent existence in the community. The smaller must be immolated or self-offered to the larger unit. He must accept the need of the society as his own need, the desire of the society as his own desire. He must live not for himself, but for the tribe, clan, commune, or nation of which he is a member. The ideal and absolute solution from the individual standpoint would be a society that existed not for itself, for its all overriding collective purpose, but for the good of the individual and his fulfillment, for the greater and more perfect life of all its members, representing as far as possible his best self and helping to realize it. It would respect the freedom of each of its member and maintain itself not by law and force, but by the free and spontaneous consent of its constituent persons. An ideal society of either kind does not exist anywhere and would be most difficult to create. More difficult still to keep in precarious existence so long as individual man clings to his egoism as the primary motive of existence. A general but not complete domination of the society over the individual is the easier way, and it is the system that nature from the first instinctively adopts and keeps in equilibrium by rigorous law, compelling custom, and a careful indoctrination of the still subservient and ill-developed intelligence of the human creature.
This is what he's saying. Very interesting what he's saying. We'll have a simple, not difficult. In the conflict of the claims of society with the claims of the individual, which is the better one? Said we're discussing. Okay. The individual, two ideal and absolute solutions confront one another. There is a demand of the group, okay, where particularly in the socialistic countries, that the individual should subordinate himself more or less completely and even lose his independent existence in the community. So, more or less, you said in the beginning, okay, there are countries which are semi-socialistic. So, there is more or less. There are laws which allow you to be free, and there are other laws which are there. I'll just give you a very interesting example, okay? I had heard long time back, but I'm now being told by people in Sweden that that's not true. In many countries, some drugs are being allowed, okay, because they feel that the individual has the right to live his own law, okay. So that's, for instance, wearing a helmet is very good. The society is concerned that the individual should be protected. But when you say that a helmet is absolutely essential, you are encroaching upon his freedom. Okay, when you say that you can't smoke, okay, you are encroaching upon his freedom. So they have to mitigate the law and say you can't smoke in public. If you want to smoke, you can smoke at home where you're not harming anybody. Okay, so there are all sorts of limitations, and the problem of the individual freedom and that of the social needs is always a problem, because Hindu says that there is no single society in the world which is an ideal one. Neither this nor that. So when will we have an ideal social condition? Only when there is no ego in the individuals. Unfortunately, the attempt even in the ashram in Auroville, everybody has an ego. So it's never a perfect one, but there's an attempt of going towards a collective spiritual life. There is the demand of the group that the individual should subordinate himself more or less completely and even lose his independent existence in the community. This is in the communistic countries and the dictatorships. The smaller must be immolated, not the word immolated, killed, okay, or self-offered to the larger universe. So, one is immolated. Okay. Even if you don't want, you have to be trained for military action. In the Western countries, when the population is very small, they have got this law that for 2 years, a youth must have military training. Okay? But it can also be self-offered to the larger unit. In India, many people join the army by offering their own services to the larger unit. There is no compulsion in India. There is no conscription. But in Western countries, there is conscription. immolated. You have no right to, your rights come second. The rights of society come first. He must accept the need of the society as his own, the desire of the society as his own desire. He must live not for himself, but for the tribe, clan, commune, or nature. Normally, Swayambhavu includes many more also, and here there is one below the tribe and there is one above the nation. So the collectivity would start from the family, because even in family, freedom sometimes is a problem. Okay? The parents ask too much of the children. So first of all, the family, then the tribe, then the clan, then the commune, or the nation, and finally there is humanity also, of which he is a member. The ideal and absolute solution from the individual standpoint would be a society that existed not for itself, for its all overriding collective purpose, but for the good of the individual and its fulfillment. Even society would exist only for the good of the individual and its fulfillment. So he is not saying spiritual fulfillment, he is just saying fulfillment. So even in the ordinary life, okay, his life must be fulfilled. He must have the right to roti, kapda, makan, but he must also have a right to education. Okay, so fulfillment, simply not saying spiritual fulfillment. That would be absolutely perfect, but it's not. It need not go that far. For the greater and more perfect life of all its members. When will such a society be possible? When this society, there is no ego in anybody. So what happens? Everybody is leading a very harmonious life. And that is only in a spiritual community, or definitely in a supramental race. That is sure to happen, but not before that. So this is a problem that has to be solved temporarily, either this way or that way, by each nation. Representing as far as possible his best self and helping him to realize it, it would respect the freedom of each of its members and maintain itself, not by law and force, but by the free and spontaneous consent of its constituent persons. Note the word spontaneous, automatically. It's not that it's going to be a consent is given after an argument and considering all things. No, it's absolutely spontaneous of its constituent members. This an ideal society of either kind does not exist anywhere and would be most difficult to create. You cannot create such a society. Maybe to a certain extent you can. That's why he's saying most difficult. He's not saying impossible. More difficult still to keep in precarious existence so long as the individual man clings to his egoism. That's the whole problem. As the primary motive of existence. A general but not complete domination of the society over the individual is the easier way, and it's a system that nature has instinctively adopts and keeps in equilibrium by rigorous laws, compelling custom, and a careful indoctrination of the still subservient and ill-developed intelligence of the human nature. In other words, it maintains it by rigorous law. Sometimes it is very, very law. Compelling custom. Okay. In India, we follow our customs very, very meticulously. Nowadays, of course, the whole thing is falling apart because then the collective family, okay, what is it called? The joint family system is breaking down. But that would have ensured the customs are maintained accordingly. But now it's not like that anymore. Slowly, these things are breaking down. Because you need to go beyond that. That's all. So nature is taking care about that. Compelling custom and a careful indoctrination of the still subservient and ill-developed intelligence of the human creature. So, if you know carefully, careful indoctrination of the still subservient and ill-developed intelligence of the human being. When everybody has to be kept in line. Okay? That's why there are the village sarpanch. Okay? He will see to that everybody is following the rules and laws of the community. So that's why there are all these problems. The individual freedom is always there, and that's why you have all these in the Punjab. They have these calves, which ensure that nobody does anything which is not in the interest of the collectivity. Even in India, we have this huge problem of intermarriage between castes. Even today, it exists very, very strongly. Not perhaps so much in the urban areas, but definitely in the village areas and the traditional corners of India, very much there still. That's a human nature. So, in there, 8:30, we have got about 10 minutes. So, we can read the next one. In primitive societies. So, either Tarika or Shilpa, one of you,
I can read, Rangada.
go ahead, read it. In primitive societies.
In primitive societies, the individual life is submitted to rigid and immobile communal custom and rule. This is the ancient and would be eternal law of the human pact that tries always to masquerade as the everlasting decree of the imperishable Asha Dharma Sanatanaha. And the ideal is not dead in the human mind. The most recent trend of human progress is to establish an enlarged and sumptuous edition of this ancient turn of collective living towards the enslavement of the human spirit. There is here a serious danger to the integral development of a greater truth upon earth and a greater life. For the desires and free seekings of the individual, however egoistic, however false or perverted they may be in their immediate form, contain in their obscure cells the seed of a development necessary to the whole. His searchings and stumblings have behind them a force that has to be kept and transmuted into the image of the divine idea. That force needs to be enlightened and trained, but must not be suppressed and or harnessed exclusively to society's heavy cartwheels. Individualism is as necessary to the final perfection as the power behind the group spirit. The stifling of the individual may well be the stifling of the God in man. And in the present balance of humanity, there is seldom any real danger of exaggerated individualism breaking up the social integer. There is continually a danger that the exaggerated pressure of the social mass, by its heavy, unenlightened mechanical weight, may suppress or unduly discourage the free development of the individual spirit. For man in the individual can be more easily enlightened, conscious, open to clear influences. Man in the mass is still obscure, half conscious, ruled by universal forces that escape its mastery and its knowledge.
Very clear statement by Sri Aurobindo that freedom is essential. See, we have got 7 minutes, so we'll quickly go through. In primitive societies, the individual life is submitted to rigid and immobile communal custom and rule. You have to do what the family tells you to do. You have to do what the tribe is telling you to do. There's no question of law. Okay? Even today in India, it is like that. Okay? Some families, they say the parents should decide whom you have to marry and where you have to go for your education. All these things are still there very much. So, individual life is submitted to rigid and immobile. Immobile, there's no progress there. Okay? Communal custom and rule. This is the ancient and would be eternal law. They claim that that's the best. But then nature will not allow that. Then ultimately it will break it. Would the eternal law of the human pack that tries always to masquerade, to pretend, to claim to be the best, to masquerade as the everlasting decree of the imperishable. Esha's Dharma Sanatana. This is the claim of the every society. That what we are saying is the best. And the ideal is not dead in the human mind. Okay? That is still there. And now there is very, very ironic language. Okay? And the ideal is not dead in the human mind. The most recent trend of human progress is to establish an enlarged and sumptuous edition, note the word sumptuous edition, of this ancient turn of collective living towards enslavement of the human spirit. Chandra wrote this 100 years ago, so he is talking especially of the Russian Revolution and of the dictatorships that were there. And the ideal is not dead in the human mind. Then there is here a serious danger to the integral development of a greater truth upon earth and a greater life. Social rules are it's good so far as they are concerned, but that doesn't mean to say that there should be no progress and upward movement. They should be evolving all the time upwards. There is here a serious danger to the integral development of a greater truth upon earth and a greater life. Collective life should be harmonious, no doubt. But what about the individual freedom? That also is very necessary. So that's why simply using the word integral development. Both are necessary. So, for the desires and free seeking of the individual, however egoistic, however false or perverted they may be in their immediate form, contain in their obscure shell the seed of a development necessary to the whole. When one individual, however egoistic he is, if he is given freedom, he may do something or say something or discover something that is essential for humanity. So he must give him full freedom. Okay? Because it's always the individual who is in the vanguard of progress in a society. It is hardly ever a collective who gives new ideas and new inventions and new laws of existence. It's always the individual who does that. And then it becomes common property to the collectivity. The searchings and stumblings, even if he makes mistakes, he must have the right to make mistakes to learn. If you don't make mistakes, you never learn. That doesn't mean to say that you have to go on making mistakes. It means once you have made a mistake, have you learned your lesson? And if you have learned your lesson, don't commit the same mistake again and again. That's the justification for a mistake. Okay? You have to learn from it. So, his searchings and stumblings, making mistakes, have behind them a force that has to be kept and transmuted into the image of a divine ideal. And what's a divine ideal? Freedom. Each one has to discover the path for himself. That force needs to be enlightened and trained, but not be suppressed or harnessed exclusively to society's heavy cartwheels. Society's heavy cartwheels are very slow moving and very cumbersome. Individualism is as necessary to the final perfection as the power behind the group spirit. The stifling of the individual may well be the stifling of the God in man. And man has been doing this all the time. Okay? Right from the earliest of days. Okay? They crucified Christ. They made Socrates drink poison. Okay? Society does not value the virtues of a man who is going beyond its own standards. And Joan of Arc was burnt at the stake. Meera in our country also was given poison because she was not fulfilling her marital rights. Okay? And in the present balance of humanity, there is seldom any real danger of exaggerated individualism breaking up the social integer. The word integer means a full number, and social integer means unity. Okay? So I'm saying is not likely. There is continually a danger that the exaggerated pressure of the social mass by its heavy, unenlightened, and mechanical weight may suppress or unduly discourage the free development of the individual spirit. Everywhere, even today in the world, okay, society says you must do this. Even in religious matters, it's like that. Particularly in many, most religions, it's like that. There is continual danger of the exaggerated pressure of the social mass by its heavy, unenlightened, and mechanical weight may suppress or unduly discourage the free development of the individual. But man and the individual can be more easily enlightened, conscious, open to clear influences. Man in the mass is still obscure, half-conscious, ruled by universal forces that escape its mastery and its knowledge. So the social consciousness is always far inferior to the individual consciousness. That's all. So today we can stop right on 8:40. Next time we'll start with against this danger of suppression. I'll just make
Merci beaucoup.
okay, everyone.
Bonjour, Rangada.
Thank you, Rangana.